Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining this session. My name is Shawa, and I'm the speaker to introduce data jobs to everyone today. So there are two parts of my presentation today. First of all, I would like to collect some questions from the audience. I'm trying to understand, for example, why you're interested in getting into data, or what makes you interested in or curious about a career in data science or data analytics. I would like to start taking some questions first, because the session might be running for 1 hour or an hour and a half. So usually we do Q&As at the end, but I like to do the Q&A first. So, and then that helps me understand where you guys are coming from and the type of questions you have. And then I'm going to spend maybe half an hour to help you understand different types of data jobs. And I can talk a little bit about the job market as well. But I'm going to give you a real life example. And we'll talk about, for example, a fictitious startup that needs to run growth analytics. And then let's do some brainstorming. And through this exercise, I hope you understand where data analysts fit, right, in a startup, or where data scientists, machine learning engineers fit into different kinds of different parts of the business. So yeah, but quick introduction to WeCloudData. I think a lot of you already know about us. We are a data science training academy. We have multiple programs. So over the years, we've built business intelligence. So I can write it down here. But the programs we have include business intelligence, or just data analytics. We have boot camps, we have short courses, we have data science courses, and we have data engineering program, and machine learning engineering as well. So recently we launched machine learning engineering, and it has a bunch of short courses as well, computer vision. It has large language model, NLP, and we also have MLOps engineering course. If you're here, if you're already data scientist, you would like to upskill yourself to learn how to fine-tune large language models, how to deploy models in production, we have short courses for you. But if your goal is career switch, then you can join, for example, the bootcamp. We also have a DevOps bootcamp, which is broken down into cloud engineering. It has CI/CD, and also advanced topics. So yeah, so this is what we do, and we have really good learning outcome. I think most of the learners in our programs, they're here for career switching. So I would like to quote the ministry survey done for the cohorts that graduated, all the students graduated in 2021. It's usually 1 year lag because they have to call every single graduate, call the employers as well to collect these real numbers. And as you can see, WeCloudData is definitely on the top in terms of employment rate. We have 90.9% from the data science program. And there's some other great programs out there. I'm not going to name them. But when you look at the employment in the data field, we are clear winner and leader in this bootcamp space, because 100% of the students get data jobs. If they get jobs, it's not a regular job. They're not going back to their previous employer. It's a data job, which means career switch is successful. But most of the other boot camps, when you look at the actual employment rate in the data field, it drops to 68%, 70%. So, and the reason why we have such good, placement rate is because I think WeCloudData has a lot of differentiators. I'll walk you through that. First of all, we have pretty good success rate. There are different learning options out there, online courses you can take, boot camps. And WeCloudData is just one of the boot camps or academies. So we have, I think our success rate is definitely among the top players. And I think one of the reasons why we can help students get jobs is because we have real client projects. Most of the students in the full-time programs, or students who enroll in the real client projects, they get to accumulate work experience. We have a consulting firm. Students will work with our project managers and project leads on real life projects. They get mentored on these projects, and they practice a lot. Most importantly, they work on real challenges, and they work with the clients. That helps them understand how things work in real life. And it turns out that the student can get jobs much faster, and they can get better pay because of the experience they accumulated during the program. We have really strong career support. That's something I think is missing from a typical Coursera course. I think there are some options for you to get career support, but it's more dedicated for sure with bootcamps. I think most of the bootcamps do pretty well in career support. But other than the regular career support, WeCloudData also has one-to-one job mentoring, which means you not only get resume help, you talk to career counselors, but you also work with someone from the industry. So we have, basically we'll be working with a data scientist or data science manager, for example, and they help you review your portfolio projects. They give you the feedback you need. So they sort of tell you, the weaknesses you have and help you with mock interviews and help you improve. So listening to those feedback is very important. We also follow what we call the case-based learning. I'm going to give you one example today. We're not going to go technical, but I will walk you through a real life example and build things from scratch. Not the data pipelines, but like just understanding the use cases. But that's the approach we take to learning and teaching. We also have self-paced content, and our content, you can review them and you can watch the recordings. Not every bootcamp allow you to watch recordings of the bootcamp, right? And we have really good student or learner review. So you can go to different websites like SwitchUp and Course Compare. We're almost at 5-star, 4.9. Definitely among the top. And our capstone project is usually industry grade. I'm going to tell you some of the use cases we teach in the bootcamp. I think this will help you set yourself apart from the learners, because you're going to learn how things work in the industry. Teaching will be live, but we also have recorded classes. If you only want to go with the recorded bootcamp, that's an option as well. The price point will be lower, and then you can still get the career support and you can still enroll in a real client project. We also have part-time flexible learning options. If you're if you have a full-time job, you cannot dedicate your time to immersive programs, then the part-time programs is really good option. Not going to go through the entire list, but hopefully that helps you understand why we are different. And we'll post this on the website, and so you can review that later if you're interested in. All right, let's talk about data jobs. There are different types of data jobs. Right? So I'm just going to list them out here. There's data analytics, business intelligence, data scientist, data engineer, machine learning engineer. These are common ones, right? Or now you have AI engineers or AI specialists. But when it comes to machine learning engineering, specialization is important. So computer vision, natural language processing, MLOps. There are many different types of job titles, and these are the typical data jobs. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Type your question in Zoom chat. I'll spend some time to address the questions, and then I'll give you I'll walk you through a use case to help you understand how these all fit together. Okay. So please go ahead and ask your questions. What questions do you bring today? It could be questions related to learning path, understanding, the goal of this session is to help you understand the differences among different data roles. You can ask questions about the job market, interviews, but yeah, anything about data jobs. Cool, thanks. Looks like the questions started coming. First question, how can I get a job with no experience, such as projects and internship? I'm going to be very direct. I think in today's job market, if you don't have experience, it's going to be very hard. So you have to build the experience first. There are a ton of learners, or well, I would say job seekers out there. They have taken online courses, but if you have never completed an end-to-end project, it wouldn't be enough for you to convince the hiring manager that you can do the work, right? You need to show the proof. So you have to work on projects. Internship is not a must-have, but I think having relevant skill set and capstone project or portfolio project experience is very important. Without them, I don't think you'll even get a chance to sit in front of hiring managers. Yeah, so build the skill set first, and then work on portfolio project. Okay, I can expand on that, but let me move on to the next question. Are there any online projects you'd recommend for building a data analytics portfolio from scratch? What do you mean by online projects? Do you mean like online platforms that provide project opportunities, or any projects you can find online? So my general recommendation would be just find an industry use case first, right? So you always need to make your data analytics project business driven. It's very important. Without business context, it just look like an exercise. So let's say we have two job applicants. They both worked on similar projects. It applies SQL, Python, Tableau, or Power BI. And the dashboards all look amazing. But whoever who can do better storytelling is gonna win. Storytelling means that you need to tell, you need to have a business context, right? What you're actually working on. And ultimately, people are looking for a project that can actually be used, right? The project experience need to transfer directly into the jobs that you're applying for. That's very important. So I always recommend starting from an industry use case. It could be, for example, you're interested in insurance, or maybe you're interested in, risk management. It could be CRM and marketing, right? But you have to find an industry, a use case first, because if you look at marketing, then there's customer analytics, right? But there are also other things. But in customer analytics, then there's, acquisition, right? Retention. You'll absolutely have to find the use cases first. I highly recommend you read some. You have to do more reading to understand. The one way to Google is basically, or maybe just ask ChatGPT. I haven't tried, but you need to ask like the type of data science or data analytics use cases in marketing, for example, and try to understand the 4 to 5 different use cases, and then go to Kaggle and then find data sets with some business knowledge and context. I think it will help you build a more meaningful projects. That would be my recommendation. May I know about data architecture? Sure. I'll make sure that I mention that. Data architect. Data architect. Data architect, well, it's not necessarily just, an advanced version of data engineers. But I think to work as a data architect, you do need to have experience in at least one of these fields. You need to come from a data engineering background or software engineering, and have a decent experience with, data analytics as well. But the role here is, it actually involves more, communication with the business, because you need to understand what the business needs. Data architect also, of course, need to understand how software works, because you might be building platforms and, capabilities for the business or for the data teams to work with. So you're definitely taking a much higher level view of the entire data stack and ecosystem in your company. So it's not just building a very specific data pipeline. So if you look at data engineers, they might be building something that's very specific. Let's say the company added a new data source, let's say HubSpot or Salesforce, and the data team or the business team would like to see this data and reports, associated with the CRM data in their dashboards, or they would like to build some machine learning models to do lead generation or lead qualification. So from a data engineer's perspective, you need to build data pipelines to ingest the data. And we're specifically talking about, the Salesforce data source. So data engineers will need to, be able to connect to the data source, ingest the data, and they have to figure out where to store the data. And then they have to clean the data and load that into maybe a data warehouse, right? An analytics environment. And data engineers will need to do data integration. So there's a bunch of very specific things they need to do, and they will be writing code. But data architect, they need to make sure that whatever the data scientists and data engineers do, it makes sense from architectural perspective, because there are many different ways to achieve the same goal, right? For example, which cloud platform do we go with? When we ingest the data, do we ingest that into the database directly, or do we ingest the data into the data lake first, right? What type of ETL pipelines do we build? How do we do data cleaning? And how do we do end-to-end automation? How often do we refresh the pipelines? So there are a lot of decisions they will need to make. Data engineers might prefer to just go with the best tool, but data architect may argue that, well, cost is also very important, and we might be working with many other tools. There are new tools on the roadmap. How do they fit into this, right? So they will tell you that, well, you cannot use this tool. We might need to go with another tool that fits into the bigger picture. So that's what the architects do. They are not going to write a ton of code anymore, because they're making high-level decisions to make sure that the overall architecture makes more sense for the long-term growth of the data platforms. Okay, so that takes a lot of experience. You don't just become a data architect, from day one. I don't think there's any boot camps to train you to become a data architect, because you do need years of experience, right? Working on data engineering, platform engineering, or working with cloud, understand, a lot of those things. And that will make you, ready to become a data architect. Okay. Question from Lucas. Describe a day in life of a data analyst. Also, what would be an industry grade level project for those roles? So the day in the life of a data analyst. So first of all, there's data analyst, right, working on data analytics. There's also data scientists who will do some data analytics as well. And sometimes there's BI roles, right? BI analyst. The difference between data analyst and BI analyst is that I think business intelligence analysts or developers tend to focus on building the dashboard, right? But to build a dashboard, think of it as a project. There's a process you need to follow. You need to understand who will be viewing be looking at the dashboard. You have to sort of understand how to define the metrics. You have to build the data models, right? Try to understand what's the best way to build the data model so the queries can be more efficient and your dashboard can refresh more efficiently or quickly. That's what the BI developers do, right? They have data analytics skills as well. While the data analysts, they will do BI work as well. They can build dashboards. So the line is very blurry, right? In some companies, data analysts just work like a business intelligence analyst. But the way I see it is that data analysts, they also work on a lot of ad hoc analysis, which means not every visualization you do or analysis you do in Excel, in Python or SQL need to be displayed in a dashboard, because most of them are actually just ad hoc questions. The business will have a lot of questions on a daily basis. They may need you to pull some numbers, just run some queries, because they may have some business assumptions. They want data to support their decision making. They don't really need a dashboard. The dashboard might be for a director or an executive who need to look at the sales, for example, by different regions or whatever. But there are a ton of questions from the business where you actually need to help them address. You just need to write queries, and sometimes the output, you dump that into Excel spreadsheet, you sort of you'll format that in a nice way and you send it over to the business team. That's all they need. Or sometimes they're just going to come over to your desk and say, hey, I have this question. Can you run a query for me? And over time, you realize that you're going to have a huge backlog of questions and requests. And you obviously need to understand how to prioritize things. So yeah, that's what the data analysts do. They create a lot of value for the business because it's not that the business managers cannot run queries. It's just like they're so overwhelmed with all the other business side of things. So data for them, it's a nice insight they need for decision making, and data analysis is supporting that. A typical day would involve a couple of meetings, right? If there are bigger questions, you might be involved in meetings for some projects. But you expect to spend at least half, 40 to 60% of your day writing queries, just munging data preparation, data cleaning, and then do some data visualization. In some companies, this is called reporting, right? And then from time to time, you need to build some dashboard. You do get more time if a dashboard is needed. Expect to spend some time doing presentations. But communication is very important. Yeah, that's what data analysts do. Okay. What would be an industry grade level project for these roles? I think my colleague Eric, once said that among all the data jobs, right, we know that you need portfolio projects to showcase your experience, your skills. Data analytics, right, or data analyst job is it's easy for you to sort of showcase the learning outcome because you can always build a dashboard, and it's people are all visual. Like when you look at the dashboard, you sort of appreciate what people have done. When it comes to data engineering, it's a little bit hard to tell people what you've done, right? You can tell them like I used a bunch of tools, but it's kind of hard for people to visualize that. And data scientists who build machine learning models, you can tell them like your model is really accurate, but it's still hard for people to understand the level of effort, right? Unless you're talking to someone who's a data scientist already. But the work a data analysts do, it's very easy for everyone to understand because when you show people a dashboard, people get wowed, right? If it looks really nice. However, an experienced data analyst and an amateur data analyst, the difference is that they both can make the dashboard look really nice and pretty, right? But the amount of information you're presenting in a dashboard can look quite different. Someone who's more experienced, right? They might be actually just removing things. Like they would like to keep their dashboard simple because with one dashboard, you might be just telling one or two stories. They don't want it to be very cluttered, right? Sometimes easy is better, simple is better. But some junior data analysts, I've seen their dashboard. They're trying to cram everything into one dashboard. It looks fascinating. However, the amount of time it takes people to understand the dashboard, to sift through all those, charts to get the information they need actually increasing. But I think it's easy to impress people with some dashboard. So whatever analytics project you do, even it's data science, I would definitely recommend people to have a dashboard. A dashboard could be, a dashboard to explain sales performance. It could be a dashboard that helps people understand, the marketing effort or customer acquisition funnel. But you can use the dashboard to explain your machine learning model. Like, so for the data scientist, I think if you can build a dashboard to explain your machine learning model, explain all the variables, model performance, I think that will be very impressive. And for data engineers, I think my recommendation would be not to build a dashboard, but it would be great if you can sort of visualize the data architecture or the end-to-end data pipeline. If you can visualize that, that will be very useful. for job search, because it makes it easy for people to understand and appreciate what you've done in your project. Because people, when they look at your resume for the first time, they really don't have any context. So it's up to you to explain to people what you've done. But in an interview, you don't have a lot of time to explain things, and people will, will stop you and ask their questions, right? That sort of break the flow. So it'll be great if you can just help them visualize everything you've done first, and then the questions they ask will probably be more related to the data pipeline, for example, and then you're sort of taking control now because you built that graph and you can explain really, really well what you've done in that, right? So if you get people interested in what you've done first in 5 seconds, don't let them interpret what you've done, right? So that's because you can only have 4 or 5 bullet points, right? Describing each project on the resume. That's not enough space. So visualization is very important. I hope that answers your question. Mandy has a question about the role of different expert in a firm, in a project. I think the use case I'm going to share will help you with that. So bear with me. Let me walk you through a typical end-to-end data project. I think it will help you, and you can ask questions along the way. Richard, so I'm actually doing a Springboard Data Analytics career track. Once I finish the program, receive the certificate, do you recommend to apply for jobs right away? Would you recommend finding other projects to work on to add more experience to your portfolio? Richard, I think it really depends on how sophisticated the project you've done in any kind of certificate program or bootcamp. Yeah, I would recommend you ask someone who's more experienced to help you review that. I don't know how many projects you will work on during the program, but typically you need at least 2 to 3 projects to put on the resume. Yeah. It's a little bit hard to stand out nowadays if you only have an academic project. So you have to be creative. Like, even if you're using a Kaggle data set, I think, as I said, it needs to be very business driven. You need to write your resume in a way that it feels like you actually, through this project, you actually help some business solve some real challenge. And if you can write your resume from that perspective, I think that would be great. And that's why you need the business context. Okay. Tips for trying to pivot into data space without any explicit data experience. I worked previously as a project manager in non-tech space, have a master's of science in analytics. Michael, I think having a master's in data analytics is definitely one of the advantages you will have. And I can tell you one story. It's very. I think it's actually easy for like someone coming from project management background to pivot into data analytics. But of course, it depends on the type of roles. So we had students who's from project management background in the past, and they ended up getting like really good jobs. But their goal, like one of the students, the goal is very clear. Like she doesn't want to start again. So first of all, I think she had 15 years of project management experience, and then she applied for a manager of data science team position internally. And then she, of course, she failed because they said, well, you don't have machine learning or Python experience. And that's why she actually quit her job and joined our bootcamp. And her goal from day one is that she wants to become a manager. She doesn't want to go through like, a junior data scientist and work her way up, because she felt that she had years of management experience. That kind of makes sense to us. So the way we helped her is that we have real client projects. We sort of appointed her as a project lead on some of those data analytics projects, and that really helped her. So her goal is very clear, to become a project manager or manager of data science team. And of course, I think to become a manager of data science team, she probably didn't have enough data science, like practical data science experience. But if you would like to work as a project manager in the data space, uh, there are golden opportunities there. Because I remember I read one article a couple of years ago. They said the world need no more data scientists. We need project managers and product managers who understand data science. I think that's totally true. And I think today there's even bigger demand for, you know, product managers, data science, like project managers who understand, for example, large language modeling, because all of these startups are trying to build like their generative AI applications. You definitely need product managers. But a lot of product managers and project managers come from technical background, like they work in data science for a couple of years and they pivot to project management, product management. But for someone who's coming from your background, like product management, I definitely recommend, well, since that you already have data analytics degree now, I think it's you'll definitely find a lot of good opportunities. But my recommendation here is that you definitely need to show people that you have experience completing or leading some sort of end-to-end project. I feel like if you focus on, let's say, working on a bunch of Kaggle projects, that shows your technical skills. You might end up getting, data scientist, senior data scientist, roles. But if you still want to work in product and project management, see if you can get opportunity to work on some sort of end-to-end projects. Even working, with your friend's company or finding a not-for-profit company that you volunteer to help them manage project. I think those will be very helpful. But of course, it's more effort you need to put into this for sure. For Charlie, I'm career changing data analyst, just finished the bootcamp in analytics, and I have bachelor's in medicine. I do have analytics experience while working at a corporate hospital, which inspired me to go into data analytics, but it's tough getting interviews in job market and advice. Yeah, I know it is tough. Part of it is because the job market is tough, has been tough since beginning of the year or maybe last year. But I think it's getting better. But anyways, I think the market, there's still very strong demand for data science, data engineering, data analytics. But as you can see, like it's pretty crowded space because there's so many boot camps and programs out there that help train talents. So that's why sometimes when you don't hear back from the employers, it probably means most of the time it doesn't mean you're not good enough. It just means that it's very competitive. I think in that case, networking becomes very important. You have to sort of, try to connect with people or mentors on LinkedIn, go to offline events and see, because networking is still very effective, I think. But just from a technical perspective, I think have someone take a look at your resume. I think most of the applicants, they're actually very skilled already. They have a master's degree or they have completed boot camps. I mean, most of us can do the work, but you just need, an opportunity to stand out. That means you need really decent resume. And we don't have time to talk about resume today, but we did like a resume and job search session, I think last week maybe. You can go to WeCloudData's like YouTube channel to find the recordings. I hope that's useful. But resume, like if you apply for 100, 200 jobs, you don't hear back, you got to fix your resume. But of course, like you have to understand what's wrong with the resume, right? Is it because you don't have enough keywords, or is it because you don't have relevant project experience? Well, that's something like you have to, talk to someone who's more experienced to give you some feedback for sure. Yeah. What kind of project do you advise a beginner to build for their portfolio to land a job as a data scientist? There are so many different types of data roles, right? For data scientists, don't just focus on machine learning. I think because when I used to work as a data scientist, I have to wear multiple hats. Like you'll be very lucky if you get hired as a data scientist and all you do is machine learning. And actually, that's not how data science jobs work, most of the time. You do get ad hoc requests from the business, right? If you go work for, Meta, Microsoft, the big tech companies or big banks, I think the jobs or the roles are well defined, so you probably get to focus on, something. But if you work for a startup, like you have to do everything basically. So you probably need to roll up your sleeves and build, dashboard. So I think data collection or data preparation is very important. You need to have a project that does some sort of, data collection. So either working with data APIs or just doing web scraping. Um, that's one of the mandatory project our bootcamp students wanted to do. I think web scraping is very important, and also there are like hundreds of millions of websites out there, which means your project is not gonna look very similar to other people, right? So you can have your original idea, you find a website, and it makes it interesting, right? We have students who are interested in fashion, they'll scrape, different kind of fashion websites and do some really interesting trend analysis. But it looks, she's not applying very advanced, data science skills, but the project is simply interesting, right? And we have students who's like scraped phishing website, and the project was really interesting, and they did a bunch of visualization. They get calls from recruiters, from hiring managers, because when they read the blog post, they find it interesting, right? So data collection, and then of course you need to have data visualization projects is definitely useful. So I highly recommend data scientists to at least build one Tableau or Power BI dashboard, which means data scientists need to have data analysts, like the skill set data analysts have. That's going to help you sort of diversify your portfolio, but it should not be the focus of your project, your resume, of course, because when you read the job posting and you realize that it's not purely machine learning, focused, then adding data collection visualization will be very helpful. And then you can have 1 to 2 ML projects, right? I highly recommend one big data project. For example, using at least AWS and Apache Spark, because if you go work for a bank, for a retailer, e-commerce company, the big tech company, most likely you're not just going to use Python, you're going to use PySpark, because the data set is really big. You never download the data set as a CSV to your laptop. That's not how it works. You're most likely going to use SQL to prepare the data, or using PySpark, Spark SQL, right? It's only when you are, building the machine learning model. So you might be doing some sampling, and then you download the data set to your Jupyter Notebook environment. And in some cases, you might just use PySpark ML, the machine learning libraries, to train the models. So that's already 5 projects. If your portfolio looks like this, I think it looks very interesting, and it shows a variety of skills. But I think 70-80% of the resumes I have reviewed in the past, when it's for data science data scientist jobs, it's all machine learning projects. Now the thing is, if I'm really looking for a machine learning specialist, then degree makes so much, is very important for me. I would probably prefer someone who have a master's of data science, computer science, or someone who has a PhD background. If you're a career switcher, then you'll be at disadvantage, because if they're looking for specialized skills, right, they go with specialty, then they're looking for NLP specialist, computer vision specialist, or someone who's like very deep into machine learning. Then your chance is very low of getting that job, right? But fortunately, most of the data scientist jobs out there are not like that, actually. So that's why I think showing your SQL skills, right, data collection, visualization, definitely add 1 to 2 machine learning projects. I think that will help. Okay. Is there an internship after this bootcamp? If you're talking about WeCloudData's bootcamp, yes, we do have something called a real client project. So you'll be working on projects for 6 months, but of course you'll get one-on-one career mentorship as you work on the project. So you don't have to wait till 6 months later to start job search. Most of the learners will start job searching after they complete the first project, which is usually 1 to 2 months after, after the boot camp, when they first finish the first project. But students can pick to work on large scale project that lasts like a couple of months, or some students prefer to work on smaller scope projects so they can add more projects in a very short amount of time, so that they get the real experience on their resume, right? Most people are struggling to put something in under work experience, but with these real client projects, you can fill those gap, and that helps you sort of have more bargaining power. How can I get to the interview stage as a data scientist? Oh, sorry. How can I get to the interview stage as a data analyst and scientist? I have my portfolio on GitHub, done different projects, but having been applying for data analyst jobs, but rejections. Yeah. This is one of the common themes. Most of the learners who, or event participants in the past have told us that in the past few months, they actually completed projects, they've done online certification, they may have graduated from boot camps. After applying for hundreds of jobs, they don't receive any interview. My first reaction is that I definitely want to take a look at your resume, right? So recently we did a data fundamental course, which is open to the public, and then we sort of committed some time. We're actually still going through that, but we went through a couple of hundred resumes, because we start to receive more at the end of the course, and we're trying to write feedback for the learners, and we realized that there are only like 1 or 2 resumes that actually caught my attention. I went through a ton of them, but most of the learners just or job applicants just don't know how to write resume. So if you're not hearing back, so first of all, this is how I understand it. You're telling me that you have something on GitHub, right? Without looking at your GitHub, my assumption is that you have the right skills for sure. But how good you are, I don't know. I have to interview you. I have to look at the GitHub, right? But assuming I'm just a recruiter, I spend 10, 15 seconds, right, on your resume. You definitely have the right keywords, I think. Most of the time, people know what keywords to put on their resume. So why are you still not getting interviews? Number one reason is people think you don't have relevant experience. I think that's one of the reasons why most people are not getting interviews. But I think the second reason is a lot of people don't know how to write resume. I've seen like experienced data scientists, but when I look at their resume, I know this is a good candidate, but the resume is just really bad. So I highly recommend you go back to the resume workshop. Like we did a session either last week or 2 weeks ago. I think that session will help you a lot to understand what to put on your resume. But when you apply for 200 to 300 jobs, that's still not getting a response. And you have to question yourself. It's either the resume that needs to be fixed, or you don't have enough experience, right? So that's the first question you need to ask yourself. Is that the case? Or maybe you've got professional help already, then that's definitely, then that means your resume is going to look okay. If you're still not getting interviews, that probably means that you just don't have relevant experience. So you have to fix that. So then I'll be taking a look at taking a look at your GitHub, right? Because when I look at so I clicked on the links, I reviewed several GitHub projects, and I just realized that, okay, this just looks like an exercise. You may have done some online courses, and you're required to work on some Jupyter notebooks in order to graduate or get the certificate. But when I actually read the notebooks, and then I right away understand that, okay, you're not going to get a job, because if I carefully go through the notebook and I see a lot of problems. First of all, the quality of the code, or most people don't have description about their project. That's surprising to me, right? Because if I'm a hiring manager, I'll go to your GitHub. I'm expecting you to explain to me what you've done in this project. What is the motivation? So you should if you don't have
Shut up already.
oh, sorry. Yeah, so if you don't have a project summary or project description,
Just shut your
oh, what happened here? Let me change some of the security settings. Sorry, guys.
shut up.
Okay. Yeah, so uh, having a project summary is very important. You write that either in a PDF or in Markdown if you use, GitHub. But there are a few things you need to sort of explain to people, right? Regarding the portfolio project. Project summary, for example. What's the motivation? Why did you work on the project? Right. Um, I was how was the data collected? Did you just download a CSV file from Kaggle? That doesn't sound very interesting, right? Or maybe based on the use case you're trying to work on, you can't find a very good data set. So you have to download that from Kaggle. That's fine. But did you, sort of leverage a database, right? Or did you just use Python to load the data right away? Because in real life, most of the time, your data analysis, right, starts from, wait, sorry, guys. Okay, let's continue. So, yeah, I think in real life, most of the data project starts from SQL, right? Working with a database. So can you, for example, for data preparation, can you do that in a SQL database? That means you need to spin up an RDS instance or run MySQL on your computer, and then you have to load the data. So that gives you an opportunity to prepare data in SQL, right? And do you have exploratory data analysis? But don't just show me a bunch of charts. And explain, the interesting findings, right? So that's worth, some some effort. And then, of course, you can talk about the machine learning, but also, limitations and next steps, right? What do you plan to do to improve the models, or how your models can be used, the use cases of your models, because that's very important. You need to help people understand how you can use the models. So if you can have a project summary like this, write that in Markdown. That should be the front page of your GitHub. Right? When I go to the repo, I see this right away. And if you have some sort of visualization, that will help as well. That makes it like feel more like a project instead of just like an assignment, right? But most of the projects I've reviewed on GitHub, it really only have like one or two notebooks. And I open the notebooks, the code is not even well, commented. Try to avoid that. So that would be my recommendation. Okay. But just, I guess, in summary, I think if you're not getting interviews, take a look at your resume. That might be the issue. If your resume is, you're getting some help on your resume, then maybe what you can do is just to look at the portfolio projects and fix that part. And after that, you have to try it again. Apply for another 50, 100 jobs and see if you get responses, right? And if you really still cannot get any response, that probably means that the market is really competitive. And then you probably need to upskill yourself, right? As I said, majority of applicants out there, they already have Pandas, scikit-learn, PyTorch experience. So I think adding cloud, so that means as a data scientist, app job applicants, if you would like to stand out, but if you look at the market, everybody else already have similar skills. Of course, it's hard to stand out. So can you add some more, skill set? Are you familiar with cloud? Do you understand how to do automation? Build data pipelines. That touched a little bit on data engineering, right? Or you can choose to focus on dashboarding as well. So there's more effort you need to put into. But then try your best to find some, project experience, like projects that can be as close to real life as possible. So that, I think that's definitely one of the keys. And speaking of a resume, one of my recommendation is sometimes like the reason why you're not getting interviews is because you just have too much information on the resume. You want to have a 2-page resume or 3 pages. You're not willing to remove or delete some of the past experience that are not related to data science. So try to keep it under one page, right? Remove irrelevant work experience because it's not going to help you. And if you're applying for a data analyst job, don't put too many machine learning experience on it because people will think that you're more into like advanced analytics, so you might not be sticking around for a long time. Most of the employers are looking for someone who can stay for 2 to 3 years, for example. But if you're like on your portfolio, like all the projects are machine learning related, but the job requires, just basic data analytics, SQL, ad hoc reporting, dashboard, then machine learning, even though it's advanced skills, that's not what people are looking for. So you have to remove some of these. So you need to have like two versions. There's one version that focuses on visualization, SQL, Python, that's used for data analytics jobs. And then you have a more advanced version for data science. Because I think most of the data science job applicants, you should be open to data analytics jobs as well. So you need to have, different versions, okay? If you were a recruiter, what kind of data engineer resume would impress you? When it comes to data engineering, well, by the way, I'm still yet to go through some examples to help you understand, data engineering, data analytics, and data science. But since this question got asked, so let me briefly, respond to it. So if I'm a recruiter and I'm going through data engineering resume, the first thing I'm looking at is, do you have the right hard skills? And secondly, I'll be looking at experience. Right? Experience could be work experience, but it's actually easier to impress people with your portfolio project in data engineering, because most of the companies looking for modern data engineers nowadays, they're looking for people who are skilled in some of the open source projects and tools. So tooling or knowing tools is useful. Of course, when we're learning data engineering, we should not just purely focus on tools, right? You need to focus on problem solving, because you don't always end up using the same tools. Like you might have learned Apache Airflow for automation, workflow orchestration, but the company you're working for, they use, Dagster, they use, even cron jobs. So knowing Airflow might be helpful, but it's not something they're using, right? So you never have enough time to learn all the tools. But I think having problem solving skills, right, is very important. That means you need to have completed projects. So again, hard skills and projects, okay? All right. And speaking of skill set, some of the modern skills you need to acquire are analytics engineering, right? So we're talking about data engineering resumes. So big data engineering, and let's say data lakehouse, right? And you'll see many keywords in analytics engineering. It's things related to data warehouse, right? Frequently see Snowflake mentioned, right? BigQuery mentioned in job postings, okay? Maybe DBT, but SQL is really important, right? Data modeling and things like that. So that's these are some of the skills you need to know for data analytics engineering. You can read our career guide. Adam, I'm not sure if you can find the career guide link, but we have a data engineering career guide, which is fairly detailed. You can take a look at that. So if you would like to become an analytics engineer, you absolutely need to have these skills. Having these skills, at least they will give you an advantage. I think we had one alumni session this week, and one of the alumni from the data engineering bootcamp basically said that one of the reasons that he got hired into his current company is that he knows DBT, and that was one of the skills he picked up in a real client project he did with us, right? Big data engineering, this is a different type of data engineer job. So this is more cloud-based, right? AWS Azure, or maybe Google Cloud. You need to know Apache Spark. You need to know how to build end-to-end data pipelines. So using like Apache Airflow, understanding Lambda functions, which is serverless, right? You need to understand containerization. That will be helpful as well. But of course, ETL, like SQL, Spark is very important. So if you would like to work as a big data engineer, then these are some of the skills you need to have. I don't have an exhaustive list of skills, but definitely check out our career guide. Okay. Data lakehouse is more advanced. It's you know, so that means you need to understand how to build data lakes, which is um, sort of like competitors to folks in the data warehouse world, right? So it's either building data warehouse or building data lakes. Some companies use both technologies, but yeah. So real-time analytics, right? Change data capture, um, and basically data ingestion, right? Streaming data using Kafka, Kinesis, and some of those. So these are important, and also like working with NoSQL. Okay. Yeah, so these are some of the skills you need to learn if you would like to stand out as a data engineer. You can either focus on analytics engineering or big data engineering. These are two different directions, but if you have both skills, that would be great. Yeah. Okay. What area of data jobs do you think are most relevant in demand today to pivot into for someone with a cybersecurity background? I don't think cybersecurity is very relevant to data analytics. You can focus on like risk management but it's still quite different. So if you're coming from cybersecurity background, you can get into, any one of these data jobs. But it's more important to understand what it takes, right? So um, if it also depends on the type of job applicants you are, right? So people who typically work in data analytics and BI, right? First of all, they are passionate about data. They're very detail oriented because you don't just write the query. You need to be very detail oriented, like because you're dealing with like millions of records. The query sometimes can yield different like the wrong or incorrect results. You have to be able to tell when something goes wrong, or when you export your data from the SQL queries into Excel spreadsheet, before you send that to the business team, you have to carefully review those to make sure that the number is correct. Because if you do that 3 times and the number is incorrect, then you just lose your credibility. People don't want to go to you for any kind of data questions because they know the results. Like they don't have confidence in the results. That's very important, right? That anyone who's working in data analytics need to be very detail oriented. You need to have patience, and because sometimes like you just can't get the number right, and you have to seriously look into the queries. You have to run like the basic select queries many times to look at the raw data, right, you're dealing with and try to figure out issues. And data is not always clean. And then you need to be willing to communicate and explain the results to the business. So if you like doing that, then I think you can definitely start with data analytics, because the hard skills required to get into the data space, I think data analytics is probably easier to get into. It's still very competitive, but there are more data analyst jobs out there for sure, right? And right now, data engineering is very hot, right? It's all about supply and demand. Data science, data analytics. If you do the research and on how like the number of data engineering boot camps out there, there are probably only a few, right? Not many. So that tells you that first of all, data engineer is harder to train. Data engineers are harder to train, and there are not a lot of data engineers out there. But I think the demand is going to increase. More people would like to do that, but it's a good timing if you'd like to become a data engineer. Data science and data analytics, the demand is still very strong. But I think the challenges that people are facing nowadays is that it's also very competitive. There are a lot of supply of talents, right, in this field. But I wouldn't make recommendations simply based on the fact that data engineering might be very hot right now, because it's definitely not for everyone. I can tell you based on our firsthand experience that a lot of learners think that, well, I may have a better chance of becoming a data engineer because it's less competitive. But I can tell you, even though it's less competitive right now, but it requires people with more experience, because a lot of the data engineers, like if you look at the years of experience requirement, right, it's usually 1 to 2 years for data analyst, right, 2 to 3 years for data scientist, and 3+ years for data engineers, right? So if you just completed a boot camp, you don't have practical experience, it's still kind of hard for you to get a data engineer job, to be honest, right? So you have to look at both ways. But still, it's very in demand right now. The way you stand out is that you're going to show recruiters and hiring companies that you can complete really awesome end-to-end project. Because if you only work on like a small exercises to set up a pipeline, it's not enough. You have to work on projects that just look like real life projects people are going to do. I know it's hard. It's easy for me to say that, but I hope I can give you some inspiration today when I talk about go through that exercise, okay, or use case. And data science. Data science is definitely still very hot. We get some questions saying that, well, will that machine learning get automated? But I think it's not even close to that point yet. ChatGPT can write some code, but you definitely are not going to rely on that. One thing I would point out for anyone who would like to become a data scientist is that it takes more effort to learn, for sure. Because if you look at the curriculum of any data science bootcamp curriculum, the amount of things you need to learn, right? That's a lot. Like you need to learn SQL and Python, and you need to understand visualization. That means you already know data analytics. And then you have to learn machine learning, statistics, math, right? And then, as I said, data scientists need to understand engineering as well. You need to learn big data. So the learning path is quite long, and it makes it challenging for people. But if you can sort of go through the grind and gain these skills, it's never going to hurt, because it's always going to add a lot of value, right, in your career. But anyways, one recommendation here is you need to eventually become more specialized. You don't want to just become a very generic, data scientist. I think you need to find your specializations, which means I think in today's job market, you need to either you're really good at just data analytics in general, you understand machine learning, but you have big data skills, for example. Or maybe you're a data scientist who's also very good with software engineering or data engineering, right? Or you're a data scientist who specializes in deep learning, computer vision, or natural language processing. And then there's another type of data scientists who just have the generic data science skills, and they have very strong project management skills or product knowledge, and they work with the business really, really well. That's the typical data scientist at Meta, right? Or at Facebook, because data scientists, a lot of data scientists at big tech companies, they don't train machine learning models, right? They work with the product team. They'll be doing a lot of product analytics, doing A/B testing. That requires statistics knowledge, but you don't need like very strong data, like machine learning skills. If someone who's actually hired to do machine learning, the job title might be different. It could be machine learning engineer, but honestly, like machine learning engineer is not even a title in some big tech companies. But anyways, you need to find your specialty in data science, and that's going to be very helpful for your career. If you only have the generic skills, I think the market, right, is very crowded with people who have the generic skills. You need to find your specialization. So that's important. I highly recommend you start from some, just gaining more engineering skills. That's going to be very helpful. Okay. There's a question about the difference between database, data lake, and data lakehouse. That's a good question. It's going to take a while for me to explain. But first of all, well, simply put, databases are used, usually you run that in database instance. You need a server, you run databases. It could be a distributed database. It's used either as, an operational data store where you actually store all of your data from your production database, right? Or you can use a database as a data warehouse, which means it's running the relational database engine, but use that to build, as a analytics database for running your reports, analytics, and dashboard. So databases, used to store data basically, and there are different types, right? There's graph database, there's relational database is the most common one. There's no non-relational database, NoSQL, right? And as a data scientist or data engineer, I think we mainly need to know, or sorry, data scientists and data analysts, we mainly need to know how to retrieve data from databases, because it's usually the developers and engineers who are writing data to the database because the applications they build ingest the data into the database. And we will be reading data from the database, right? And then do our data science and data analytics, okay? And if you work as a machine learning engineer, you might be working with different types of database and you will be writing data to database. One example is if you're building a recommender system, just like if you work as an engineer at Netflix, right? Then you're generating real-time, either batch-based, right? So on a daily basis or hourly basis, you're generating movie recommendations for the users. You need to store that information in a database. So you're going to write that to, let's say, a Cassandra database, which is a NoSQL database. But for read performance, you might need to cache that in a caching database, right? Such as Redis. So you'll be working with different databases because the latency, the scale is important. But again, the database is really just for you to store and read data. Data lake is more like a pattern, the usage, how you use that, right? So when we have really massive amounts of data, the typical relational database may not fit the purpose. And companies will want to dump all the data into the data lake first, and then they will build like big data engineering pipelines, right, to sort of do ETL to to clean those data and prepare the data and send them to other databases, other data store, and use that when you definitely start to work with bigger data sets, and also it will be a good fit when a lot of the data the company work with are unstructured and semi-structured data. For example, you're dealing with a lot of JSON data, a lot of text data, for example, video or voice data, and data lake might be a better fit because you can store text in relational database, but you can't really write queries to analyze text data in a traditional relational database very efficiently. But of course, there's the search engine database, there's vector database now, but data lake is more like a pattern and how you're going to architect things and use it. And data lakehouse is just the next generation of data lakes, because when Hadoop and Spark came out, it has big promises, but over the years, data lake didn't really fulfill that promise, because originally people thought that you don't need database anymore, you don't need data warehouse anymore, you just need data lake. You just dump everything into the data lake, but obviously it's not the best idea. It helped, right, with many companies to solve their data scaling challenge, but it's not the best tool. It's not one size fit all, and that's why the next generation of data lake is the lakehouse, which sort of combines the offline, the batch processing, and also real-time streaming data together. And there are different patterns that you can work with. Databricks has Delta Lake. There's also Iceberg, and there are different open source projects, and one open source by Netflix, one open source by Uber. So yeah, but that's the lakehouse. It's definitely more promising. So there's also the data warehouse concept. I won't spend too much time on this because it may not be of interest to everyone today. But definitely, if you would like to become a data engineer, you need to understand these, and you'll most likely you'll definitely start your journey by working with databases, especially relational databases, writing SQL, and then you'll move on to big data engineering. So that's when you're going to be working with data lake, big data, and Apache Spark. And data lakehouse is the next, more advanced version of this. So I think after learning, like becoming good at lakehouse, you can probably, go find a senior data engineer job. But that requires, you to have experience for sure. Yes. The number of job posting for Tableau is more than Power BI. That's an interesting question, huh? We start to see more demand, at least on the training side, more people asking about Power BI, but I agree with you. Tableau is still like, if you look at the number of jobs in some areas, there are actually more Tableau jobs out there. So we recently made some changes to our data fundamental course. So we're running the third cohort, right? So originally we included Power BI in the data fundamental course. It covers like SQL, Python, and Power BI. But now we actually changed that to Tableau. And Power BI is just, from a training perspective, I think of it as a more advanced version of Tableau. Because if you just want to learn how to build dashboard, I think Tableau is a great tool. And it's very easy to begin with. Power BI has some unique features like data modeling, right? And you can definitely achieve more with Power BI. And so for someone who want to become business intelligence specialist or BI developer, Power BI is very hot right now. But end of the day, I think you can, unless the company is looking for someone who's just like expert in Tableau because they love Tableau, most of the time, Tableau, Power BI, the skill sets are very transferable. Because to tell the difference between a junior and senior data analyst, I think the difference here is not how pretty the dashboard is, even though most of the executives will love to see pretty dashboard, but it's just how you structure the dashboard, how you tell the story. That's very important and takes some experience actually. So I guess my point here is that the data storytelling skills is very transferable. Like the tool doesn't really matter. I've seen people using Excel to build amazing dashboard and they can just tell all the stories they need. So they don't really need Tableau. But of course, the tools can make your life so much easier. Yeah, so for beginner, you can pick either Tableau or Power BI, but I think Tableau is easier for you to get started with. Is Python necessary for entry level or junior data analyst role? Is it Python more senior roles? I don't think knowing Python means you're more senior. If you look at most of the data analyst job postings out there, SQL is definitely more important than Python, right? Because not all data analyst jobs require Python. You're still dealing with SQL most of the time. Some data jobs or data analyst jobs require Python, right? It depends on the team. And frequently, data analyst jobs require both SQL and Python because they just think it's nice to have both. Even though you're going to use SQL 95% of the time, right? They still ask for Python. So if you think, if you come from a non-coding background and you sort of have this fear about programming, just go with SQL. SQL is not hard to learn. Anyone can learn SQL for sure. And get really good at it. And you will be able to get the junior data analyst jobs. I guess my answer is no. Like you don't really have to have Python, but adding Python is definitely going to give you some advantage, right? So after learning SQL, definitely I would recommend learning Python. It's something you have to learn. I think people start to teach that in the elementary school or high school already. So I think it's a must-have skill. Yeah. For anyone who would like to work in data analytics. That also allow you to work on more advanced analytics because not everything you do can be like can be done in SQL, right? Text analytics, for example, it's way better to do that in Python. So yeah, so for junior data analyst job, I think SQL is more important, but knowing Python is going to give you some advantage. You definitely need to learn Python, but knowing Python doesn't mean you'll get a senior job because that's That's the minimum criteria you need to have if you would like to work in data science and data engineering. So yeah. As an accountant with a specialty in financial reporting, what would be a good complement to my existing skill set? Would you recommend learning data visualization? Yeah, absolutely. I think if you would like to work in data analytics, you definitely need to learn data visualization. There are a lot of jobs out there, data jobs out there that require you to have data visualization skills. Whether it's doing data visualization in Excel, in Tableau, Power BI, or using Python, I think that's an important skill to have. Because when you communicate with executives, sometimes it's hard to write like very, a lot of text just to explain your point. And visualization is very powerful. So even if you don't work as a data analyst, knowing how to do visualization is going to help you become a better storyteller. And then if you would like to switch to data, then to data analytics, you absolutely need to learn data visualization. Yeah. So if you come from a financial reporting perspective, if you're working more frequently with Excel, Google Sheet, then I absolutely recommend you pick up SQL first so that you can do more advanced analytics, or you can deal with bigger data set, and then go with visualization. So pick up, Tableau or Power BI. We had someone, a student who did our like SQL short course. Like a couple of years ago, we have a SQL short course. Now it's a data fundamental course. I think it's in one of the testimonials actually. She was like the VP of risk management team, right? So she used to deal with Excel, but after writing SQL, I think I remember like when we asked for some like testimony, and she said, "Oh, I actually like applied whatever I learned in the SQL class." To write queries so I can actually deal with data sets that's bigger than 1 million. Because I think at the time, Excel only allow you to have like process a maximum number of rows you can process is like 1 million. So it worked out for her. So definitely learn SQL first and then pick up data visualization. Yeah. All right. So we went through quite a bit of questions. Now, let me go through this exercise to help you understand how these roles actually, fit into a real life project. Okay, so let's say we're building a startup, right? The business context here is that we are launching a let's say, I don't know, any kind of industry, right? E-commerce, it could be or let's say fashion mobile app, okay, startup. And went viral on TikTok, okay. All right, now business problem, and let's say we have I don't know, let's say we have 1 million users, okay, already. Well, if you already have 1 million users, I think you can definitely get more investment, right? You're going to get millions of dollars of investment to grow the team. But as a small startup like founder, right, it's definitely a very demanding job because you need to build up the team. You might be actually coming from software engineering background, so you built the first version of the app. But there's one point where you just don't have the capacity to write code anymore because you have to seriously manage a business, right? So there are business challenges or a business, okay? So your investor, right, is asking for reports, like on a monthly basis. They've, angel investors or whatever, Series A, they invested millions of dollars. They would like to know how well the business is doing on a monthly basis. So they're looking for some key metrics such as daily active users and monthly active users, right? And So they would like to see the DAUs and MAUs, right? Okay, and then they're interested in churn, okay, or how you acquire your customers and things like that. And maybe the customer acquisition now, or maybe conversion is a challenge because, as I said, they become really viral on TikTok. So people actually download their application, but it's very convert them into a long-term user because they don't have that stickiness. Maybe the app is viral, but people don't really like it. There are product issues, right? So churn rate is really high, right? So we don't have conclusion here. This is a typical business problem people are facing. So churn rate is high. The question is, okay, why is it so high? And how can we reduce that? Right? So these are the business questions. And then they will come to the data team and say, okay, help us understand this, right? Okay, I'm going to pause here because there's so many business questions you can ask, right? But let's say we focus on churn. Churn rate is really high. People, let's say 1 million people, let's say one of the TikTok videos, 1 million views, 100,000 download of your applications. And then most people will stay only for they will download and use it once and then they stop coming back. Right? Let's say 20% of the people will keep using it for a week. And then only 5% of the people will keep using it for, let's say, a month, right? And that might be a pretty big problem because that means, maybe that's just the nature of the business or app. But if you keep losing customer, then you have to keep acquiring new customers, right? And keeping people engaged is not all the story. Like, because how do you make money, right? How many people actually subscribe, and how many people actually pay for something in your app, right? So, and that sort of helped the company to become more data driven, right? Now, and the data team, right, need to help them solve a lot of challenges. Let's think about it, right? So let's say data problems, okay? If we would like to, well, maybe I'll write down some business questions, let's say, right, the data team get, okay? Why, uh, how many, okay, first of all, what is the daily active user and monthly active user, let's say, month over month, right? That's the question from the investor. You have to create a report for that, right? What is the average session duration? Which means when people log in and start using your app, right? Typically, how long do they, stick with your app in one session? Do they use it for 5 minutes? Do they use it for 5 seconds? Or do they actually keep, they're very engaged and they keep using it for half an hour, let's say on average. I think TikTok has probably very good, session duration because you just keep flipping through those videos, right? So keeping people engaged is the ultimate goal because the longer you stay in the app, the better opportunities they have to monetize. Right? Whether it's showing you more, advertisement, just like what Facebook and Meta does, right? But that's the whole, like that's the objective. So business would like to know this. What's the retention rate, right? But they also want to know the retention rate in, let's say, in the first session, which means how many people actually just stop coming back after they've, create an account and play with it for 2 minutes and they just never come back. These are just the wrong customers to have, or maybe your product need to improve, right? But they also would like to know the retention rate for a 7-day, right? Maybe first month, 3 months, 6 months retention rate. Okay. All right. right? So we'll keep adding some business questions. But if these are the questions, what do we do? How do we answer these questions? Feel free to chime in and give your opinion. So if you get hired as the first data scientist or maybe the head of data in this company, what would you do? Of course, you need to hire a data scientist or data engineer. You have to build a data team, right? Where do we even begin? It always starts from data, right? You need to ask, do we even have the data? What kind of data do we have? Okay. So when we start any data projects, just keep in mind that it's always driven by the business. The business has challenges, they have a bunch of questions, and we are here to help them. But the question you need to ask yourself is, do we even have the data to support this kind of analysis, right? And then you probably need to talk to the business, right? And IT to figure out the data systems, right? Um, for example, what kind of data sources do we have? Okay, most of the businesses will be working with CRM tools and marketing tools, right? So maybe marketing they use MailChimp for email campaigns, right? Or every time you download an application, they will trigger some sort of welcome email, send you the registration details. Okay, so and I'm not sure if this kind of mobile application, they probably don't have a sales team, but they probably still deal with like CRM tools, or it could be like, sales and CRM. It could be the internal. It's more product driven, right? It doesn't really rely on any salesperson. Um, so they, in this case, they might not be working directly with the HubSpot or Salesforce, but they may actually have their internal CRM system, because it's more about how many people actually register, sign up, and pay, right? Or subscribe. So that could be internal databases, right? The production or operational databases. Any other data sources? You do advertising. So that means you have Google Ads, data from Google Ads, Meta Ads, TikTok, right? And then you have the user activity data, and that's basically your production data from your production database, right? So you have user profiles, because when people create a profile, download the app, right? You ask them questions, so they'll tell you about themselves. Okay, so for example, location, interest, gender, age. Some apps still ask these questions, but people don't have to answer them, right? But that creates the opportunity for machine learning and data science, right? We can talk about that. And registration details. So when did they sign up, right? And also activity logs, basically, or events, right? So any page views, clicks, right, scrolls, any kind of activities that you can whether it's it could be events collected by the front end, also the server, from the servers, right? So these are some of the data sources, and but companies typically deal with like at least 15 to 20 different SaaS tools, right? So there are a lot of data you can actually ingest. So again, first of all, we have a business question, and we have to figure out what kind of data sources we have, right? And what's next step? You need to know if you actually have a data infrastructure, right? Because of course, to build this mobile application, we need databases and we need servers to run the app, right? But those are usually, belong to IT and software engineering team. But on the data team, we probably need to have some sort of data infrastructure. So we need to have like, cloud, right? Maybe you're running everything in AWS, right? How do you store data? Maybe in Amazon S3, a bunch of databases, okay? So you need to sort of build up your data infrastructure. This is where people talk about data warehouses versus data lake. There's some decisions need to, be made, right? Okay, once you have the data infrastructure, right, you know where to ingest data, how to store your data, what kind of analytics tool you need to do. Data infrastructure also include tooling, for example. Okay. And then we need to start doing data ingestion, okay, or data collection, right? Which means where do we ingest the marketing data, right? So ingest, right, marketing, CRM, right, user, whatever, behavior data. Okay, so all kinds of data into either database or data lake, right? And there's some decisions we need to make, okay? Once the data is ingested, and of course, we need to start doing the data cleaning, or this is typically called the ETL process, or there's ELT, right? The ETL stands for extract, transform, and then load, right? ELT is basically extracting first and loading the data into the warehouse first, and then do the transformation in the data warehouse. So these are just two different approaches. I wouldn't say one is better. It all depends on the use case. For companies that have massive amounts of data, they may prefer ETL, or the traditional businesses, they've been doing ETL for many years. But if we're talking about the modern data stack, people may prefer ELT. So there are pros and cons, and we have to decide that, right? So that involves a lot of SQL, data modeling, and dealing with databases, right? And then once you have like a data warehouse, we start to actually answer the business questions, because you need to get the data ready to a point where you can actually write queries and answer business questions. And there's a lot of effort up front, right? You need to figure out all the data sources you have, and you need to understand how the business use them. And you need to understand, you need to build a data infrastructure, which sometimes won't take a lot of effort because you can just build things as you go. And then you need to ingest data. That's a lot of effort. But with certain tools, like, working with Airbyte or Fivetran, you can still manage to achieve that within weeks. It could be months, right? And then you have to go through this ETL process. This is probably the most significant amount of effort that goes into the ETL pipeline to clean data, to merge data, and build the data models that you can use for data analytics and data science. Okay, and then we start to do data analytics, right, and BI to basically answer business questions. Okay, storytelling, whatever. Now, where does data engineers fit in? And as you notice that actually, this is probably what the data engineers would do, right? Okay. Data engineers will need to do data ingestion and help with the data infrastructure. In some companies, that's more like data architect, or they have platform engineers. So I don't think data engineers will need to be expert in like cloud infrastructure, because companies will have like cloud engineers and DevOps or platform engineers. But in a small company, you're probably just given the AWS credential and you just need to do everything yourself. So I would count that as like data engineering effort, right? And definitely data engineers need to help ingest the data, do the ETL, ELT, or in this case, it could be analytics engineer, right? But I tend to group like analytics engineers under data engineering. It's just one type of data engineers. So a bunch of data engineering effort actually you need to go in before data analysts and data scientists can even do analysis. And of course, but maybe this is going to take 2 to 3 months or even longer. So I don't think the business will have the patience, right? So they always need questions to be answered. So that requires data analysts to sort of just go to the raw data and raw tables to be able to understand the business logics and write complex queries to sort of do part of what data engineers would do, like, do data modeling and, do some data cleaning, ETL, so that they can build dashboard. So, but building a data warehouse is like a bigger effort that can happen, in parallel. Right? So this is where data analyst and BI analyst would focus on, just addressing the business, pressing business, questions. And so now they can answer questions like, what are the daily active users? You can easily write queries to answer that question. Calculating average session duration. You might be working with window functions and things like that. So these don't require machine learning. You don't need a data scientist to do this. So data analysts will be focusing on these, right? Okay. But if you would like to do more advanced analytics, this is where data scientists come in. Let's identify some of the data science opportunity with this company. So again, the context here is that we're launching it's a mobile startup. They use TikTok for customer acquisition. They have a very high churn problem, right? And they're collecting user activity, behavior data, user profiles. Okay, so let's say the goal here is that, can we figure out how to reduce churn, right? And then, but reducing churn, well, there are different types of churn problems. What about the first, let's say, first 24-hour churn versus the first 7-day churn? And there's, the month 3 churn and the month 6 churn, right? People leaving after they use your app for the first time, I think it's a product issue. This is related to product analytics. You got to fix your product features. So that means data scientists need to sort of dig into the usage logs, like how people actually use your app after they download and register, create an account, and start to browse your app, right? In the early days of Facebook, and it's more about, okay, how do people getting friends? Because one of the biggest challenges that people stop using Facebook in the early days is because they just don't have friends. They don't have anyone to talk to, right? And that's why they came up with the ideas of like uploading your, your phone book or whatever, finding contacts, right, who are also on Facebook, and they can do friend recommendations and things like that. And there's like a magic number, right? If you can hit, I'm making this up. I forgot the exact number, but let's say if you can make 15 or 17 friends on Facebook, then you're much likely to stay forever, right? And if you make less than 17 friends in the first, let's say, X amount of days, then you're much more likely to leave. Okay, this is the power of data analytics, because the data scientist or data analyst will dig into the data and tell them, well, you need to get people to 17 friends. And then the product team will have to do brainstorming and say, okay, so what do we do? Like, we need to get people 17 friends. Is there anything we can do? Can we change the product, add some features, right? Do recommendations, whatever. But that gives people the ideas, with inspiration to sort of create a better app, and so that they can keep people engaged and then retain them. Okay. So when it comes to data analytics, you not only because if you identify some trends in the data and you can tell people, oh, you got to do this, it doesn't solve the problem, right? To be able to solve the problem, you need to be able to influence some sort of decision. In this case, like if people leave in the first 24 hours, you got to change your product, right? But what about people leaving like after 3 months of usage? Why? They already have 50 friends. Why are they still leaving? Or why do they become dormant? Like they stop coming back. But maybe they come back like once every 3 months. That means they don't get to see your ads very often. So how do we make more money, right? That's what Facebook is trying to figure out every day. But I think that's a different type of that's different story. So they need more advanced features. The hook itself, like in the 24 hours, is not enough in this case. So that means you can use other ways to influence, right, people's decision to whether they stay or whether they come back and become more active. But this is where personalization becomes more important, right? Personalization, they give you news feeds, they give you friend recommendation, but they do a lot of things to keep you engaged. Okay. And as a data scientist, these are the opportunities because you can build machine learning models to predict who's more likely to leave. Right? Because on the marketing side or product side, if you can build machine learning models to identify high-risk customers, then you're more likely to come up with some good ideas to send them email campaigns to retain them, for example. Or at least you would like to understand why a specific segment or group of people are more likely to churn. And then you're going to do something about it, right? So these are actually going to rely on data science, machine learning, and the way we measure the success of these programs is, how much improvement we can make. Let's say if we improve the churn or retention, right, by 20%, and it can do the math. Does that mean we retain let's say 600,000 users on a daily basis, on a monthly basis? At Facebook scale, that's totally possible. And then by retaining 200,000 people or 600,000 people for an average of 6 months, how much more ad revenue can we get? Right? That's because the whole business is about advertising. Right? But they're going to do this kind of ROI, return on investment analysis, and that tells you how successful the campaigns can be. And your machine learning model as a data scientist is very important, right? And that's why they're paying so much to someone who can help them improve the model performance. Okay. Another example of data science or machine learning is, let's say we would like to understand the customer behavior better, right? So customer segmentation, or basically want to understand the customers better. Okay, maybe they want to know what type of customers they have, or what kind of customers actually they attract, right? This application. So that requires you to understand like the gender, the location, maybe age group of the customers. But people lie; they don't want you to track their age and gender. But your behavior probably wouldn't lie, right? So maybe they know that 50% of the time people are not going to tell you the real gender and age. I think on Facebook it's less of an issue because it's a real social network, right? But it's just an average, application. People nowadays that are smart, they don't want to share the real information. And that's why they're building machine learning models to infer, right, or predict your gender, predict your age, which means whether you're male, female, whatever identity you have, it doesn't matter anymore because, if you fit into a specific identity group, you share certain similar behavior, right? That's all they care, right? They don't care how you label yourself, but they know you're in a specific group, and this group of users, they tend to share similar or common behaviors. And that's the signals they're going to use to improve their advertisement targeting, right? But first of all, we want to be able to predict someone's identity or predict someone's age group, right? Because certain ads might want to target people in 18 to 24 age group. So based on your social network, the friends' average age, right? Whatever. So, or whatever, fashion items you purchase, you browse, they will be able to collect this kind of signals and build machine learning models to predict that. So some people like that, and some people, because the machine learning problems is, challenging and it's interesting. But some people may not like it because you think it might be too creepy, right? But again, I think from a data scientist perspective, like you don't really look at any individual customer. It's not like a lot of people concerned about their privacy. That's a legit concern, but I think when data scientists train models, they only care about the performance at the model level. I don't really care about each individual instance. So anyways, but that's the data science, or machine learning stuff you can do. And so customer analytics, right? Churn prediction, gender, right? Or customer profile prediction. There are a lot of things you can do using advanced analytics. Okay, so hopefully this helps you understand how things, how different roles work. But there's another type of role, which is machine learning engineering. So ML engineers work more like software engineers. So they not only know how to build machine learning models, but they know how to deploy models in production and also how to fit that or integrate that into the applications. So for example, this application realized that if you can sort of do, can we do per some machine learning engineers to build recommender systems. But building recommendation systems not only require machine learning, you need to understand system design, because you're building some sort of machine learning product now. It's not really just analysis. You need to basically, understand how to build a system diagram, right? Because the data needs to come in real time, and you have to choose the right databases. You care about the latency and the scalability of your system, because and you also need to, this is probably where you're going to pick up big data, because the data is massive in this case. If you want to do any sort of product recommendation, you might need to leverage deep learning as well, but ultimately you need to be able to scale model training, right? Automate ML pipelines, deploy ML models, okay? And also you need to monitor ML model performance in production, okay? And you also maybe need to build, not only deploy also means you need to do the model serving, right? So these are more engineering focused. So ML engineers understand machine learning. They're very good at it, but they also know how to scale things, automate things, and deploy models in production. So that sort of takes your data science skills to the next level, and it's getting closer to a software engineering position, or it's sort of somewhere in between. Like it's someone who knows both data science, machine learning, and software engineering. And that is certainly a very in-demand job, and it requires more advanced experience for sure. But that's what the ML engineers would do. Okay. All right. I hope I answered most of your questions and help you understand how different data roles fit into a product-oriented team or company. Do you have any additional questions about data jobs, or any questions about data career? All right, cool. So it's been 2 hours, and it's 10 o'clock here in Toronto. So I hope everyone enjoyed this session and find it useful. Again, I think some of you asked some questions about resumes and job search. I highly recommend you to watch some of the recordings. So you can go to youtube.com/@WeCloudData, and you should be able to find the event recordings. And the recording of this event will be uploaded next week. So yeah, thanks everyone for attending this session, and I hope you guys have a good evening.